Hello everyone, thank you for joining us for our session for In the Know Tips and Tricks for Evolve 365. We wanted to start this weekly series to give you some simple and easy tips that anyone can go back to their desk and quickly implement. As always, we know your time is very valuable, so we'll keep these sessions to no more than 30 minutes, sometimes less. We're pushing the topics out monthly, so you only have to sign up once for the monthly series instead of 4 or 5 times. We're talking about our June sessions today, and we're going to be discussing SharePoint libraries. If you've missed any of the past sessions, you can find them on the Planet Technologies YouTube channel at youtube.com/user/Planet Technologies. And again, we're getting into our June session, and today we're talking about SharePoint. So I'm your host, Tanya Kaiser. I'm the Evolve 365 Trusted Advisor for Planet Technologies. I have more than 15 years experience with project management across multiple industries, including technology, legal, nonprofit, and construction. I'm a longtime Microsoft geek and a big SharePoint nerd. So this is one of my favorite topics that I get to talk about today, SharePoint. If you ever have any questions after our sessions, you can always reach out to me on Twitter or LinkedIn. Just a little bit about Planet. We've been providing expert support in the Microsoft world for over 18 years. We offer full services for the entire Microsoft Cloud and Productivity Suite, including advisory and deployment and training services, mobile application development and solutions, and strategic business consulting, including technology, compliance, and security guidance. So again, we're going to jump right into it, and today we're going to talk about SharePoint libraries and the folders versus custom columns argument that has been around just as long as SharePoint. So I sometimes refer to this as a dogs versus cats argument. You have passionate people on both sides, and end users are just kind of left in the middle trying to figure out which is the best way to use libraries within SharePoint. So last time we discussed SharePoint and looked at the different list apps that we did. Today we're going to talk about document libraries. We'll take a little bit of a deeper look into the folders versus custom columns argument, and I'll show you on some demos. So hopefully it sends home the message, and it's really all about what's going to work best for you, your users, and your company. So here we go, folders and custom columns. You'll see on the screen, again, there's several reasons why people love folders. One of the main reasons that when I talk to people who are working in SharePoint or who use it as their intranet or as their collaboration tool, and sometimes even as their storage locations for archive and record-keeping purposes, folders are just easier for people to manage and adopt. It's something that they're very familiar with. They know that they can go set it up really quickly. It's a little bit more ad hoc, so if you have a lot of governance plans and structured taxonomy, folders are just really easy to get going. One other reason that I hear quite often is that you can set individual permissions on each folder versus doing it on an individual file. So another argument for folders is that if you create your category folders, you can then upload large number of files directly into those folders. There are some limitations within SharePoint. One of those is the 5,000 item view limit. So for any single list, library, or app that you have, the maximum view number for SharePoint is 5,000. Now when I say maximum, that's a little bit of misnomer because you can do different things to get beyond that 5,000 view limit. But once you hit that magic 5,000 number, you start to have some restrictions and see a little bit of issues that you can have in the settings. Again, but the number one reason I hear for folders is that's very familiar. People are used to using a file share with a folder structure. They're used to using Windows Explorer on their own computer, so they just want to take that file structure and put it into SharePoint. Now on the other side of the house, you always hear the argument for custom columns. One other thing that custom columns are referred to is managed metadata. So if you hear metadata, managed metadata, tagging, custom column, or a site column, they may mean the same thing. And all that is, it's a special column within SharePoint where you can add any category or content that you want. So if you want to tag documents as original, draft, and final, or customer name, customer A, customer B, customer C, or even project status, if you're using any sort of identifier, not for the file itself, but for the grouping of those files, that could be a custom column or managed metadata. So some pros in that column. This allows people to have multiple categories. So if you're using a folder structure, you may not want to put the same document in 2 folders and have duplicates and then cause some conflicts with edits. But you also can't have one document be in multiple folders. It's not going to work with that folder structure. You can do that in custom columns. The thing that I love probably the most about using custom columns is that you can filter content on one screen. So I don't have to click inside a folder and keep clicking inside. I can do that on the same web page. So if you have taxonomy or you're talking about governance, you can set up those same columns and categories site-wide and make them reusable across your whole SharePoint site. Site columns can also be searched. So if you're really wanting to do some function, higher functions with your search, out-of-the-box search works great in SharePoint. You can configure your search to be searching on your site columns, and that's where you start to get terms like tagging and metadata. You can also set a default value. So if you have, a project site and the default value for every document until it's changed is a working document, that can be your default value. So, and one of the other reasons that I really like to use custom columns, so if you have a document in a folder and you need to relocate it later, that changes the URL, which can potentially cause dead links if anybody has copied that URL. Where if you have a custom column and you change the value in the column, the URL for the document itself is not going to change. So lots of different things. Normally what happens with users is they hear all these reasons and then they just don't understand how it works in real life, in practice. So we're going to go straight to our demo. I'm going to jump over to a SharePoint site. And this is where we're going to spend a lot of our time today. So this is the same demo tenant that I've been using for the last few weeks. And all I did was set up a library. We're going to show the folder library first. So this is just a demo library. Now I am on a demo tenant and it is first release. So you'll see SharePoint looking slightly different depending on what screen I go to. I'll hop over to the SharePoint homepage and you can see I've got the new view on Office 365. It says SharePoint instead of sites and I've got the cards instead of the typical tiles. So in my document library, this is what most people do. They create a document library, they give it a name, and then they start creating their folders. So in my example here, I've created 2 folders and we're sorting at the first level on customer name. Now if I click into this folder, you see that I've added 3 other folders for original, working, and final documents. And this is one of the things that we get into right away. If I wanted these folders to appear in a certain order, I'd have to come in and I'd have to rename them. So if I come over to my menu and just say rename, one way to do that is to number them. And again, this can get pretty tedious, and this is what people are used to with the file structure. So this is why they immediately come into SharePoint and start creating folders, because they may be copying documents from a computer, from somebody that's switching to a new computer, or maybe a project closed out and they're uploading them for archival purposes to SharePoint. So that's one thing that the folders can do right away. If you just put them in there, the default is going to be sorted by alphabetical. So now I've got my 3 folders inside this customer project. We can see on my breadcrumb, I'm in my folder library under customer name, and I uploaded 5 different documents into each of these folders. So you can see these were uploaded by one of my other demo tenant names. I'm logged in as Katie right now, but these were uploaded by Sarah. So again, going with my breadcrumbs, I know I'm in the folder for original documents. I know I'm in the library, the folder for customer name. And I'll just show you really quickly, there are 5 documents in each folder. You can see I'm having to click back and forth just to view all the documents. Now here's the really interesting thing. We know that there's 5 documents in each folder, so I have 15 items in this one library. We also have our 2 folders. So really if we count the folders, there's 17. 15 documents, this would be 16, this would be 17. I'm going to pop over to my site contents really quickly, and again I have the new view. So if you've never seen the updates in SharePoint yet, you're getting a preview of it. It looks very, very different on the site contents. I'm going to switch back to classic SharePoint just to keep it a little bit easier. You can see in my folder library here, it says I have 20 items. And this is one of the really big gotchas about folders within a library. SharePoint will count every single folder as an item. So I know that I uploaded 15 documents. There's only 15 documents in that library. But because I'm using a folder structure, I have 5 other folders in there. So SharePoint's reading all of those as an item. So if you're uploading a lot of documents, especially for long-term projects, maybe you've been working offline, maybe it's a new, again, archive or retention project, or just the number of documents that you're creating, if you're using a lot of folders, it can very easily push you towards that 5,000 item limit. So that's the first thing to be aware of. Me personally, I get really irritated when I just have to go back and forth, opening documents. So you can imagine These are just 2 customers, and if we have a standard documents, original, working, final, and we start to add in more folders, this could grow really, really quickly, but we're never really going to know how many items, how many actual documents we have in there since we're using folders. Now, the other thing that I always like to point out is you can see this modified date. So on the default view within SharePoint, you always get the name, the modified date, and the modified by. So these folders were set up this morning, and they were edited 49 minutes ago. But if I click into them, these folders were edited 3 minutes ago. Now, if I click into them again, 48 minutes ago. So because I did rename those folders, it's showing it as an edit. But when we go back to the home page on the folder library, it really says 50 minutes ago. And this is my other really big gotcha for folders and things to be aware of. So other than not showing the true number of items within a folder, now the other part of it is you're never going to see the true modified date for the documents within that folder. So this modified date is actually the modified date for this folder. And that's why even though these had a more recent edit, we're not going to see it at that top level. So I'm going to switch over to my other screen really quickly. I'm just going to click into these original documents. And we can see, again, they were edited 49 minutes ago. And just to kind of send this point home, I'm going to go in and just edit one of those documents really quickly. You'll see it change on the screen, but again, since we're using folders, we're never going to be aware that there is a recent document in there. So I'm just going to go in and using my other persona in my demo client, I'm just going to make a really, really quick edit to a document. If I do a quick refresh, we'll show that that top document was just edited a few seconds ago. And again, going back to the home screen, we're never really going to know that. It still says an hour ago because it's reading the modified date for the folder. So these are some of the things just to be aware of with folders. Now I'm going to switch back to my PowerPoint really quickly. And we start to talk about, okay, we saw folders. We know why people like to use them. They really want to mimic a structure that they're familiar with. That's the way they're used to organizing things. But now we want to look at, so why are we not wanting to use folders? And there's several reasons that I already listed. One is I don't like to go from screen to screen and have to click back and forth and use the breadcrumb trail. Even though it's showing me my location, sometimes won't give you the full information. And if you're using a lot of folders, you can be several layers deep and still not be sure where you're at. Are you in the right folder, especially when you have a lot of folder content in there? So one of the other reasons, and this is just a SharePoint limitation similar to the 5,000 view items, is your URLs actually have a limit to them. So depending on which URL you're talking about, it's 256 characters or 128 for the actual file name. So you do have a character limit within that URL, and every time you add a folder, that is another piece within your URL. So it can make your URLs unnecessarily long, and you can hit that character limit. I already talked about the modified date. That's a big one for me because you want people to go to your SharePoint site and look for current content. And if you set up a folder a year ago, they may never open that folder because they think the content in there is a year old. So that can be a really, really big gotcha to look out for. I also showed the true number of items. So if you're looking at your site contents, using the folders is going to throw off that item count. If you know that every final documents folder should have 10 documents, but you never see 10 documents listed because it's counting the folders, that may throw people off as well. We just talked in general about the folder structure getting very deep, not just for the URLs, but just for navigation and easy ways to find things. And this is one other thing to be aware of. So if you ever have to move a file from a folder, so maybe we move files from working to final, that's actually changing the URL every single time. So if somebody has linked to that or bookmarked that file, they're going to get hit with a dead link. So I'm going to go back to my demo really quickly, and we're going to set up a brand new library, and we're going to use the recommended custom column. So right away I'm just going to come in, and I'm just going to create a brand new library. And then I'm going to go into my new library, and before I even upload any documents, I'm going to create some custom columns. So if I wanted these columns to be used across the whole site, because every single time we want a customer name in there, I could actually come over to Site Settings and then go to Site Columns. You may need advanced permissions to be able to do this, and create a brand new column. So in this case, I'm just going to call it Customer Name, and it's just going to be a single line of text. There's not going to be a default setting because it's going to be just general. And I'm going to say OK. I'm going to go back to my library. And again, I switched back to the classic view, but my tenant does have that new library view. So now that I know there's a site column, I'm going to come back into library settings, and I'm going to come down to the columns area right here, and I'm going to say add from existing site columns. Now this is one thing that you can do because we know that I added that custom column to the whole site. So anybody within the site can come in and add this. So there's our customer name, and I'm going to add it. And that's automatically going to put it into my items. And then I'm going to create some new ones. So there's two ways you can create your custom columns for managed metadata. So I showed you one, creating a site column. I'm going to show you the second one, which you can just create within the library itself. I'm just going to call it document type. And this one is actually going to be a choice. And then it even prompts you to fill in your choices. And we're going to use the same categories we had for the folders. So we have original documents, we have working documents, and we have final documents. And since I'm calling my column document type, I don't feel the need to add in documents after each one. So now we can choose, is this a drop-down menu, is it a radio button, or is it a checkbox? And checkbox is one of the pluses for using custom columns, is if you have a folder, you can't have one document in multiple folders. There's no built-in way to do that. You would have to upload the document twice if you absolutely had to have it in two folders. Using the checkboxes, I can select two categories for a document. And again, we're going to make our default choice a working document. We're going to select OK. So now I've got really the two columns that I need to mimic that folder categorization. Not the folder itself, but the way that we were using folders to categorize content. So I'm going to go over here really quickly onto my All Documents view. I'm just going to make sure that those folders are showing up. So we can see customer name, document type. So now that we've got our columns set up on our brand new library, we're ready to upload content. So I'm going to switch over to my other screen really quickly, and I'm going to upload some documents. And you'll see very quickly documents start to get populated in here. So now once these documents are uploaded, one of the questions that we get is, well, now I'm seeing a bunch of items on the screen. That's a little too busy for me. I don't have a clear way. My folders kept everything categorized, and I knew that even though I had all these folders, I knew exactly where I needed to go to find, customer name, working documents, or customer name, final documents. So I'm going to refresh my screen. You'll see all the documents that I uploaded with my other persona. My default column type was working. My customer name is blank because we haven't filled that in yet. So this is what some people are afraid of. I only have 16 documents here that I uploaded. But if 16 is one thing, what if I have hundreds of documents? What if I have thousands of documents? This is one of the other great arguments for custom columns. So right now, it's not very powerful. There's really no need to filter on any of this because they're all default type for working. And there's no real customer names in here. But I can come up to my library settings and select Quick Edit and quickly fill these in. And since it is a quick edit, I can just use this to just drag and fill in several of those. And then I'll put in what my second folder was. And these are just generic examples. These could be project names, they could be countries, they could be categories. And then since we did populate our document type, I can select original. And then again, because it is quick edit, I can use these to drag down. We'll say my PDFs are the final documents. I've got a few more PDFs here. And then we'll say some of these are the original documents. And again, the thing is if I notice that it's getting really annoying to come in and uncheck working every single time, I can go back to my settings and remove the default value. So now I've put in the customer name. I've really quickly edited these documents from document type. I say stop editing. SharePoint's going to take a few minutes just to modify that. And then now that I have these columns come in, I can come in here and filter on only original documents. Or maybe I only want to see final documents. And it's really, really quickly. And here's the best part. I can filter it further down. Maybe I only want to see final documents for customer 2. And again, these are all filters. Works very similar to Excel. You can clear them at any time just by selecting the column name. So it leaves you on one screen, and you still have the ability to drill down into that information. So if we know that we really just want to see customer 2 documents, there we go. We can see they have original documents and final, and that's it. If we want to switch back to customer 1, we can see their documents. So this is a really, really big thing that I love about custom columns. I'm not having to click back and forth. All I'm doing is viewing everything on the same screen and using filtering, and I can get to where I want without having to move from this same page. Now the other great thing about this is there's no folders, so I know that these documents were all modified about a minute ago. Now if I come in and I start modifying one of these documents, in the folder scenario, we would never know that a document was modified because we're seeing the modified date for, not for the folder, it's going to show the old one, but for the document itself, we're never really seeing that. But again, if I come in, these are all a flat view, a flat file view is what I like to call it, and I modify any of them, it's going to show right away. So I'll be able to filter. Let me refresh really quickly here. And you can see some of these were modified further back. So I'm going to click back over to my presentation, and you saw, one of the reasons why we want to use custom columns. They let you have multiple categories. So I can go select some of those documents as working and final, and it'll show up under both when I filter. You can filter content on one screen, which is the reason I really love to use it. I showed you how you can set up a column and categories site-wide. So now that I have that column set up, I can go use it in any document library or any list or library too as well. So not limited to just documents. Site columns can be searched. So once my index ran on this site, it would start picking up those terms. So if I did a search for customer name, final, I'm going to start to see things. You can set a default value. Again, depending on how you work, you may want to do that for users to make it easy, and then they go through a process of changing it. And the thing that I really like, changing the column value is not going to change the URL. So if I go back to my SharePoint site and say I needed to move one of these files from my working folder to a final, if we look at this one, start using a list, and you see the URL, here I'll open the properties, you can see it's a site, it's content type hub, which is actually the name of my team site. And if I keep going through this URL, I've got my folder library, which is the name of the document library. Then I've got my next folder for a customer name, and then I've got my next folder for working documents, and then I actually have the name of the URL. So if I wanted to move this from working documents to final, it's going to modify that URL, and any link somebody had to it is now broken. So if I do that in a column library, and we look at the URL for this, again, content type hub is just the way my tenant was named for my team site. And we've got our document library name, column library, and then we've just got the file name. Create and manage a blog. And we're going to get to those %20 symbols in just a minute. And then that's it. This is really the end of my URL. If I come in here and I edit this one item, let's just edit the properties really quick, and change it from original to final and working, it's not modifying my URL. I have the exact same URL that anybody can use, but the category changed. I could even come in and change it to another customer name. So that's one really, really big plus of using the columns. And I'll show you really quickly on the site contents. So again, we know in our folder library we have 5 folders. There's actually 15 documents. In our column library, we know for sure that we have 16 items, those 16 documents that I uploaded. So again, it's something that can be really, really powerful, even though it takes a little bit of time to plan. So the other thing that I wanted to bring up, we already talked about why not folders, why not custom columns. there's really not a lot of arguments from my perspective on why you wouldn't want to use those. So like I said, it requires some additional planning and setup. File names must be unique in SharePoint. So if you have the same template that you use for customers and you don't want to include the customer name in the file, maybe you have project plan customer name, but you don't want to use that. You just want to use project plan. That wouldn't work for custom columns because they're going to have the same file name. So folders do let you categorize things when you have the same file name. So the other big argument that I hear is if content ever has to be exported from SharePoint, you wouldn't have a folder structure. Again, it really depends on what you're going to be using SharePoint for, how you want to work with your files, but a lot of the other arguments against custom columns is because people just aren't used to doing that little bit of planning. They want to get in, create folders, and be done with it. So showed you a lot of those items. We've gone back and forth. The one thing that I wanted to point out before we start to wrap up is naming SharePoint items. So you may have noticed that when I created my libraries, I didn't put a space in there. And the reason I didn't put a space in the app name is because that affects the URL. So you see that %20 is how a space shows up in a URL. Now for the library name, you can always go change the display name in settings. The other thing that you may have noticed is there are no date or version numbers on the end of my document files. So I didn't put start managing a blog version 1 or start managing a blog edit 6/8/2016. You don't have to do that because SharePoint keeps track of it for you. So that's a holdover from file shares. And again, going back to breaking our URL, if I came in and named my document version 1, version 2, version 3, every time I rename that document, I'm modifying the URL, which is going to break a link for somebody. So one other argument in our cats versus dogs, we talk about folders, we talk about custom columns. The other one that comes up is what should you use in a file name? Should you use underscore? Should you use a dash? Should you use a space? So space will show up as %20 in a URL. That adds to your character limit. And if you're using folders, you're going to hit that pretty quickly. It also tends to be just a little bit less clean of a URL. So the alternative to that is to use underscores. Now SharePoint search will separate words with an underscore. So if I came in and named my file manage underscore a underscore blog, it knows that those are 3 distinct words. It won't do the same thing with a dash. So your choices are spaces or underscores. Now this goes back to your planning. If you know you're going to have a lot of folders, that %20 may make a big difference in reaching your character limit. If you know that you're going to use custom columns and metadata, you can go ahead and use the spaces because you don't have to worry about the extras in your URL. So those are just some things to think about. I'm going to just go back very quickly since we're almost at time. So I use spaces in these, but again, you can see that those are definitely showing in my URL. No question about it. Let me go back to the beginning of the URL. And again, this is just where you want to start to think about how you're going to let SharePoint help you. So there's that %20. For search purposes, it looks great. The name is there nice and clean. That's why people don't like the underscores, but it is something to think about, especially if you're going to be using a lot of folders. So while we recap really quickly, I can go on and on about SharePoint, but I hope this demo has shown you the difference between using folders and using custom columns, also known as managed metadata, in SharePoint. It does require some planning, even if it's just a little bit, just thinking about what your category is. Now normally that's already done for you because you have your folder names, and if you're using consistent settings like original, working, final, or project names, staging, those are already the info that you need in the custom columns. So moving content around in SharePoint can be painful. If you plan ahead, it's easier to maintain in the long term. Now here's where people get stuck a lot. They already have a lot of libraries with a lot of folders out there. So you don't want to go through a process of moving all of that content, and I wouldn't recommend it either unless you have a dedicated SharePoint admin. But you can hide the folder option in settings so nobody can create any new folders, and then you create a new view without the folders. Once you have that new flat view, you can use the quick edit to add all your metadata, and you saw me do that earlier. And the one takeaway that I will give you is that folders are not the enemy by any means. Again, this is a very, very constant, ongoing argument within the SharePoint world. Some people will never stop using folders, and some people will never use a folder in their life as long as they're dealing with SharePoint. They're not the enemy. Use it when it makes sense to you. If you're moving a lot of content from a file share to a SharePoint site, then you may want to use your folders. So it really is just use them when they do make sense. And the biggest thing is educate users about the best practices. So this isn't something you want to force on your users. You want to explain to them why, let them know that in the long run, they're not seeing folders may make them a little bit uncomfortable, but once they start getting used to filtering, they're going to realize how much quicker they can get to content versus clicking back and forth. So that's my recap on items today. One of the things that I did show is that my SharePoint page changed. So you saw my SharePoint homepage had the new cards view. You even saw my site contents page change. That's a recent update to Office 365. And one of the ways that Planet can help you keep up to date with those changes is with Evolve 365, which is our subscription-based help desk as a service for Microsoft Office 365. It really helps end user adoption, and it helps evolve your organization to be more productive. My role as a trusted advisor is to let you know those changes are coming. So I would, if you were my customer, I would let you know, by the way, there's some SharePoint changes coming that may look pretty drastic to your users and may cause some confusion because things are moved and they look different. So I would help you with that. And then we can also provide our on-demand self-help training, which is a big component of Evolve. We have more than 25,000 training videos on there. We're constantly updating our content to make sure that we have content that's going to keep you and your users informed on the recent changes. So I'm going to skip the demo for that, but we do have a free trial if you want to take a look at the site. That's at freetrial.o365support.com. You can view some of our sample videos there. Now this is a trial site. We have over 25,000 videos including SharePoint content. You're only going to see a sample on the trial site, but it does let you take a look around, see how the content is listed. So you can sign up for that free trial, and if you ever have any questions on Evolve, you can always email us at info@o365support.com. So a couple of events coming up. We do have the rest of our June series on tips and tricks. There's also a free online conference for SharePoint, Office 365, and Azure. That's happening June 20th through 23rd. It's called Unity Connect Online, and we have several Planet Technologies people speaking at that. I'll be speaking about SharePoint. Jennifer Mason and Kathy Dew will also be covering some Office 365 content as well. So it's a great conference. You sign up and register, you get access to all the videos for 30 days after it. So even if it's a little too busy during the daytime, you can still go in and get some of that awesome SharePoint training. And then again, at the end of the month, we have Planet's Best Practices for Windows 10 deployment. So if you're considering moving to Windows 10 in your organization, that would be a great session for you to attend. I've seen a couple people hanging out, but no questions, and since we are at time, we're going to wrap it. But again, if you ever have any questions, whether it's about SharePoint, Office 365, or Evolve, feel free to reach out to me on Twitter or LinkedIn. You can find me at any of those locations under my name, Tanya Kaiser. Thanks everyone for joining today, and we look forward to seeing you next week.